All right. Hello. Can you hear me? Cool. I cannot really see you fully, but I know that you're there. So welcome. Let's start. So you are here, and this is your choice. You can leave now if you don't want, because there will be dragons and wizards, as you see by the title. Title of this presentation is Are Agile Leaders Wizards? And I truly mean it. I want to answer this question, and I will be digging through actually Tolkien's work, which isn't really related to Java in any way. I don't know what would be the connection. So if you want any Java-related talk, then probably you should go, and I won't bother. Okay, let's greet ourselves in Elvish. It's Aya. It's in Quenya, a language invented by J.R. Tolkien for his world, actually. It's not only for The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. And inventing language is like maybe a weird thing to do, but we're programmers, So using invented languages is like our job. So I feel it's appropriate here to start with Quenya. But why are we really here? I wanted to start with this question, very simple question. Why are you here? Why are we here? And for this whole talk, I will be just digging down with you. Actually, I want you to participate, at least in your thoughts, to follow me, and I will try to do everything not to bore you to death. It's 4 p.m. already, and second day of the conference, but I think it's a really crucial question for you to ask, and not only as a leader but as a person. What's your purpose? And for this presentation, I was really curious how Tolkien himself was motivated to write The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, because it's really a ton of work, And I wanted to start with the reference to the book you may already know if you are interested in the topic of, let's say, self-improvement or something like that, by Simon Sinek. You can see that J.R. has this book on his desk already. And in this book, particularly, there is this one question to be answered. Why? The why is the greatest question of all. It's your purpose. It's your cause or belief which motivates you to do everything. And if you just state that loudly, I believe that you will be a good person, good leader. And for the purpose of this talk, we will be following Tolkien's motivations. And first, a riddle. I said that there will be no Java language, but there are some other artificial languages. Does anyone have any idea what's this weird language here? It's not Elvish, it's not. Actually, it's Anglo-Saxon, because this is the poem from around 9th century, written by Ceolwulf. It's the name of the writer. And this particular, actually it's only 2 verses. These 2 verses inspired Tolkien to start writing Middle-earth, basically, to start creating the world. It translates to, Hail Erendel, brightest of angels, sent unto people over Middle-earth. It's obviously has a Christian references, because this was the time when the Christianity in the Middle Ages was very popular, as you know. But there was something in this poem which moved Tolkien to start creating the whole world. I assume that everybody in this room knows at least that there is this, let's say, movie trilogy, and maybe there are books, I believe that you know that, and there will be spoilers, obviously. If you didn't read the books, your fault. If you didn't watch the movies, it's only like 12 hours with the extended edition, so you can do this as well. So Tolkien said that he felt a curious thrill when he read these 2 verses. and something stirred in him, like he was wakened from sleep. And it really takes a little to find a motivation. And about motivation, I will talk more in a minute. But there was something remote and strange and beautiful behind these words, he says. If I could grasp it, far beyond ancient English. So this Anglo-Saxon verse is actually on your right-hand side, yes. You have the picture from his Middle-earth world. It's not only Middle-earth, the world is called Arda actually, but it's Erendil, name of the elf who shines as a star and is a sort of guardian for the good people of Middle-earth. So as you can see, Erendil, it was a literal inspiration for him. But the next, I would like to talk to you about how it all started for me, actually. If you read the abstract for this talk, you probably noticed that I read this Hobbit and then the Lord of the Rings and actually now the Silmarillion to my two daughters, now 11 and 7. And this is like for more than a year, actually it's 2 years right now, almost, we've been reading Tolkien. There is something in his creation by, the whole world, which touched us together, you know. And this particular drawing is by my daughter. It was like from, I think, 4 years ago, maybe. And you have to forget her that this is Luthien, who's supposed to have dark hair, black hair, and obviously she hadn't known this when she drew this, so you have to forgive her, please. But Luthien actually is the elven woman who was beloved by Beren in one of Tolkien's first works, and this was his wife. In his mind, this was his wife, and the love story between Beren and Luthien is actually inspired by his love to his wife. So he says that Tolkien saw his wife dancing, and it inspired him to write a poem. And then there is this work, the book, which actually is very interesting. Has like 4 or 5 versions. One is the poem, one is the essay, one is the excerpt, and the broader poem. And I read this to my 11-year-old and 7-year-old daughters, and they were listening about comments about changes in the time between 1917 and 1950s from Tolkien himself. It was strange. And going back, my dad also read The Lord of the Rings to us when I was like 9 or something like that, so it's becoming a tradition. With that, maybe I found this statement by Tolkien himself, and I made it his why, or one sentence which shows his mission to create beauty in daily life. He created the whole world. He wrote, for example, Beren and Luthien about his wife and him. And this is the quote from 1911. It's before First World War. And TCBS stands for Tea Club Barovian Society, a club he founded with his 3 friends. And he was back then starting the studies on Oxford University, Oxford College. So very, very early in life, he knew that he wants to create beauty in daily life. And you may say that in 1937, there came a success. So yeah, we really love to be successful. We want to be praised. It's a nice feeling, correct? And in this particular year, The Hobbit was first released and it was a great success. It was so great that the editors, the publishers actually, wanted Tolkien to write the continuation of this work. So he gave them the Silmarillion, and they rejected it because it was too hard for them. Actually, the Silmarillion, if you know the story, it came after Tolkien's death. His son, Christopher Tolkien, published the writings collected throughout the ages in one book in 1977, so 40 years later. And he said, Tolkien Senior, said that he cannot think anything more about hobbits because he already described all about hobbits in The Hobbit. So it was fairly easy for him to try to do something else. And because it was the Silmarillion was rejected, he didn't treat it as a failure, but said, okay, let's then put this Silmarillion world into Hobbit's world. Or maybe let's put hobbits into the big Silmarillion world. And that's how The Lord of the Rings was created. As you can see, he wrote The Hobbit he wrote Hobbit and it took him 7 years, and The Lord of the Rings 18 years. And there are these two other titles I wanted to mention here. First is Agile Manifesto, correct? On Fairy Stories is sort of the manifesto from Tolkien himself about fantasy and also imagination and motivation and purpose. And it came in 1939, just short of the Second World War. And the last book published on top of works from Tolkien was The Fall of Gondolin. Do you know which year was that? It was actually 2018, last book published by his son, who died a year ago. And The Fall of Gondolin was published in 2018. So as you can see, it's the Tolkien Legendarium timeline, as you can see, very big sort of span of time. And now you can say that he was very successful in this. There were small problems and small obstacles on the way. But let's imagine that you are a young man, you have 24 years, you just married, and then you have to go to the war. And this is actually what happened. Tolkien he actually volunteered and trained for the officer in a signal department and fought in the Somme battle, as well as, you remember this, TCBS, T-Club, Baravan Society, as well as his friends. And it turns out that one of his friends died on the first day of the battle, and the second died a couple months later because of the wounds. And I would say that 3 months ago, it would be hard for us to imagine such a thing, but now nowadays it's maybe even easier to relate to this. And in this 1916, you can see that it was between this statement from Tolkien that he wants to create beauty in his life and before this manifesto of his, before his commercial success. And he didn't crumbled. He only tried to find the beauty in life far, far away, maybe not in the other galaxy, but in the other world. So, which brings me to the first point of this presentation, actually. Fairy. It's this imaginary place in Tolkien's book on fairy stories, which was described as something like this. It contains many things, besides elves and fays, besides dwarves, dragons, trolls, giants. It holds the seas, the sun, the moon, the sky, and the earth, and all the things that are in it, tree and bird, water and stone, wine and bread, and ourselves, mortal men, when we are enchanted. And this is what fantasy is. It's a sort of art, even subcreation, as he calls it. And we want to go back to our presentation title, maybe. It's the high time. Why this manifesto affects us? I think it affects us very, very easily, and we can find it when we just go through the excerpt from this book, from his manifesto. So fantasy, as Tolkien explains, is the link between imagination and the final product. It's the whole world when we design something, imagine something, and the timeline and space between this and when we deliver the final product, when it materializes, when it can be seen, maybe touched even. Sorry. And for this, the fantasy, the fairy tale begins. And there are actually 3 things why fairy story, which maybe for children, as you may wonder, is very important to us, I believe. Why? Because, as Tolkien says, some books are mocked maybe to be only the childish book, like maybe you can laugh from somebody to be a fan of Tolkien or Tolkien's works. And, I must confess, this is not very easy for me. I'm an introvert, but I'm a geek. And as you may already know, 15 minutes talking about Tolkien, it is what it is. But still, in everyone around here, there is a child. And I don't mean that we have to be childish, but we want to find a child in ourselves. Why? A fairy story helps us to escape from reality of things. And why? Because we want to return to some permanent truths which are not maybe in our everyday life present. Like you don't see the good and evil fighting, day by day, and you don't see black and white when you look from the window. And sorry, there is an error. Should be recovery. One of these should be recovery. The other is. So the other item is recovery. Recovery is something which includes the return and renewal of health. So it's something that helps us to recover from this world in sense of that we can relate to something else. And consolation is the last item which Tolkien brings. It's the joy of boundaries, joy beyond the boundaries of this world. So by thinking abstract, you can go back to this world, you can go back to your day job maybe, and maybe find some new truths, some inspiration, motivation. What do I mean by that? Let's try to guess who I'm talking about. It's obviously from Tolkien's work, somebody, a leader. He's a member of Istari and emissary of Valar. There are some weird names here. He's sent as an aide to free peoples of Middle-earth, and he is disguised as an old man. He studies history of Middle-earth and knows his purpose. Did I describe Saruman or Gandalf? You wouldn't be able to say, actually, because I described both. If you know Tolkien, Gandalf was this old man, Ian McKellen in the movies, who is traveling in grey, and Saruman is the other old man in white. It's Christopher Lee. And they both present a sort of the leader for people, although it's not a traditional leadership maybe for both. And why am I showing this particular image? So it's because they both had the same mission originally, so we can say, our leaders, especially senior leadership, they want the people who are working, let's say, on the day-to-day job to know what's the company's mission, what are the values. And there were a couple of presentations already on this topic, so that's probably, you already had the time to think about it. But what's different between them? So, leader can both manipulate or inspire. And this is the difference between them. I sort of did a small manipulation by showing you the hints for the leader, and you obviously came here because of Agile leaders. Yeah, it would be about Gandalf or whatever. It could be Saruman, it could be Gandalf. It could be anyone from the wizards, maybe. So Gandalf plays this differently, and also this is another book by Simon Sinek, Infinite Game, and the except is that he plays the infinite game, which means that he doesn't go for the short-term income or short-term goal, but goes for the long-term and maybe even infinite goal. And that's also what a good company goes for an infinite goal. Like, Elon Musk, he wants to go on Mars. Like, it's not a short-term goal. You don't go on Mars in 1 year. You don't go on Mars even in 10 years, maybe. It's a long-term goal, but It goes for the humanity, for the future, for the science. And what makes, in this particular comparison, Saruman different is that he wants to be just, right now, more powerful and rule because he thinks that he can rule better. We'll go back to him in a second. Just one maybe example for you to relate maybe to our industry. So do you know what's the Zune? What was the Zune? It was a device. No idea. Do you know what then iPod is? Anybody knows? Oh yeah, I'm hearing that Microsoft, I'm sorry, I don't hear you well, but I've heard the term. So yes, Microsoft did the Zune just to be better than Apple, because Apple had this iPod idea, and it was, profitable for sure. But it was entirely not why Apple did the iPod in the first place. They did it because they wanted to change the experience for listening to the music, so that everybody can hear the music from wherever, and thousands of music files. And right now it's silly because we have Spotify or whatever. But a couple of years ago it was a thing. And Microsoft failed just because they wanted to play the Pinhead game. They wanted to be shot them goal, want to beat them, we want to beat Apple, and we want to make profit from that. So Gandalf does this differently. But what if he, for example, did things differently? Like he had a chance to take the ring. And this is like the thought experiment. Maybe we'll go through this quickly. And what would happen if he took the ring? For sure, he could save the Middle-earth. He could win the war with evil. He could free the people even. But he says that he will be a vicious ruler. And actually, Tolkien himself, he also describes his work in, for example, his letters, writes that that Gandalf would be a ring lord who would think in the first place he would be doing good, and he would become rather self-righteous instead of being righteous. And this is the big difference, because self-righteous is when you think about yourself that you are doing the good thing but for your own sake, and righteous is something which can be seen from external as good. And this is also something which is present in, for example, a concept called conscious leadership and conscious capitalism. And again, this may be sound weird, but it's actually a thing. Rush Sisodia, there is this man who describes conscious capitalism as something which may seem as an oxymoron, because capitalism as a word means actually control for profit. So how can you consciously control for profit? Actually, you can, but you have to be socially responsible for your people, for example, for what you do, for the environment, not only for profit, but so not only for shareholders, but also for stakeholders and all involved. And Saruman in the books also, he is not a good leader just because he uses his voice to manipulate people. He uses his skills to force his truths to everybody else. And you may see that this is an example of a bad leader, because bad leaders are just rulers, just as Saruman would be. And you can see here, he says even to Gandalf when he wants to convince him that we must rule. We must rule because we have more power, and the order will be when we will rule, for the wise only could see what people cannot. And his purpose was knowledge, rule, and order. So you may say that he had good intentions, but used it against people, only for his good. Which brings me to this conclusion of Istari, which I didn't say what it means. It means obviously wizards. And there were 5 members of the Istari. First, obviously, Gandalf, which is the good one here. And I will just briefly go through the purpose statement from them, because we figured Tolkien's purpose statement at the beginning. Let's now figure his purpose statement. So Gandalf was sent by Valar, and I have to mention it goes more geekier here. So Gandalf was actually a Maya, which is a sort of angel-like creature sent by Valar, like sort of archangel creatures, to protect people of Middle-earth. And this was to fight Sauron. And this was basically his mission. There was no short-term goals like to have profit in this area or that. The end goal was to basically support people in the fight, however long it takes. On the other hand, Saruman has one mission statement: to defeat Sauron. Actually, he meant it because he wanted the ring for himself. He wanted this for his own good. Because he plays the finite game, he competes, like I said, with the example from Microsoft and Apple, and it doesn't do any good for him. There was also the third wizard. He was sent to protect all the creatures of Middle-earth from destruction, and while we can argue on that because it's debatable whether he succeeded or failed. There were also two wizards here, and they wanted to help West by helping East. There was this mission. Obviously, there is this story in the Legendarium that whenever they were sent and whatever they did, it was their mission. And because there are 5 wizards, and they are all Maya, I will just show you the next one, because there was another Maya who has this one-sentence statement here. His one sentence is to reduce waste and make order in the Middle-earth. Do you have any idea who is this? Obviously, this is Sauron, yes, in his fair form of Anatar, because he used to be seen as a sort of elf. Maybe there will be this series, Rings of Power, maybe we'll see him there. But what I wanted to say here is that this mission statement seems like quite okay. It's actually like when I was writing this, I was figuring out how to call it. It seems like it's almost lean development, sort of reduce waste and make order, like some kind of the scaled agile framework who can be which can be helpful for big organizations to optimize things, in a way. So Sauron's problem was that he was sort of concentrating on bringing this order, but he forgot about people. And this power and order was the first and only purpose for him. He wasn't inherently bad. Just his actions weren't caring about the people he was supposed to maybe even protect or make order for them, etc. And in this parallel, what is the ring? Because, as you know, Sauron made the ring. So it will be a symbol of power, order, and control, obviously. And one can say that Sauron did this ring to concentrate this in this one artifact. Magical, it's magical, obviously. But this will be a symbol for us of this sort of motivation to be powerful enough to bring the order. And if you can think about this, there were some different drivers for motivation in the history, correct? And first, and the dates are, sort of the approximate. First, biological drive, which was to eat, drink, live. Basically, when you were living in very, very old times, it was all you cared about. Then let's go to 20th century and let's put this motivation thing in the management industry, let's call it. So in 1950s there was, and it started obviously maybe around 1950s, maybe even later, earlier, never mind. But motivation for, if you are a manager in 1950s, it's obviously that you motivate people by rewarding them for doing the right job and punishing them for doing the bad job. But it turns out that it's not the best motivation we can do. And actually, scientists, and again, this is a digression maybe from the topic, but if you are not into psychology, then you can say that, yeah, psychology can make up any hypothesis and prove it. But let's assume for a while that we can say that what motivates us is not the reward we get, but if we love what we do, then we are sort of inclined to do this. And I have some examples. So do you know what Encarta is? Anybody? Encarta, again, it's Microsoft. For some reason, I don't know. It's an encyclopedia which was distributed on a CD, this small piece of drive, which consisted many complete and very thorough descriptions of anything around us. So nice encyclopedia. The people were paid for, and the distribution was top notch. It was Microsoft in 1990s and early 2000s, but it failed because of Wikipedia. And when I ask you what Wikipedia is, it's not really a question. It's like Wikipedia is Wikipedia. And what was the cost model of Wikipedia? It's actually no cost model. You are spending your free time to contribute for something which doesn't pay off. It's really strange. So how can it be? It's actually a sort of motivation which there is another book from Daniel Pink, Drive, which states three things which are required for motivation to be true. So first is autonomy. We have to be autonomous so that we can do what we do, how we do, and how we want to do, and proceed with this as we want. There is also mastery. It cannot be a simple task. There has to be something we have to pursue. And there is a purpose. The thing we do has to have some meaning, something greater than us. We have to be a part of something. We want to be part of something. So this really motivates us, not the reward we get at the end. And if any of you is an open source contributor, I bet that you probably don't get money for that unless you are hired in some company like Red Hat, but still, you do it because you believe it. It's a good thing to do. So let's, for a while, go back to Frodo. Here is our Frodo. He is not a leader. He's a guy who was just, let's say it, talked into securing this small ring to a safe place. And let's say for now that this is our project. We want to conceptually deliver so that it's ready. We have this requirement. Let's take this small thing from here to there. As you can see, the product described this very well. So we have our defined goal, and we pursue the goal. And if it was presentation about waterfall, we would spend now a couple months on planning the journey and documenting how we'll be doing the journey and spending the time to gather the team so that they can figure out how the journey will look like, etc. But as I said at the beginning of the presentation, this is Agile. So let's assume that we started the journey. And for those who don't know, it didn't finish with the delivery of the ring to the safe place. It actually took much more from Frodo. He had to go to the Mount Doom and destroy the ring himself, which wasn't an easy task. Actually, one may say that it was more difficult for him than he could bear. But this still was an ambitious goal, and it changed during the delivery. Story we all know. We all can relate to that. And this shows us this manifesto, but not from Tolkien, but Agile, that we should respond to change. And how can we do this? Poor Frodo wouldn't be able to do this without his team. And the team actually is here. They went from Rivendell, which is like the midpoint of the journey, and let's go through our team. What are the features of the leaders in the team? Because there is a leader, correct? It's Gandalf, obviously. So Gandalf represents this servant leadership concept. I don't know if you know it. It's from Robert Greenleaf, it's from 1970s, and then, for example, Ken Blanchard. This states that it's another oxymoron, maybe like conscious capitalism, that servant leaders think about people first. So it's total opposition of what, for example, Sauron or Saruman did in this in World of Middle-earth. Gandalf represents the servant leader because he listens to people, he talks, spends time. And if any of you has a manager or is a manager, you know that spending time on one-on-ones is actually profitable for both you and the person on the other side, regardless of whomever it is. You are a manager or you are a contributor. And listening is a very important part of this. On empathy, I could spend like many minutes talking what it is. Empathy is basically an ability to think about other person from his perspective and why it's a feature required to be a leader. One could say that you can just manage without being empathetic. Actually, I think it's like the first and the foremost, the most important feature among this. And let's go next. And you can see that here the leader is not Gandalf. And I will just prove that anybody in this team can be a leader. Anybody in your team can be a leader. Why? Because you also have some features which are required to maybe not be a leader, but create a successful team, successful life, whatever. And in this process, sorry, not in this process, in this, you can see some other features of servant leaders. Healing. So not only that you have to deal with some hard things like failures, you also have to be responsible for it, for your people and for others. And again, if you are a contributor, it's still the same. Awareness is another very important thing because it starts with self-awareness. So if you are, let's say, messed up, first you want to figure out like how to proceed with yourself. There are many good books to read about it, like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. If you know that, that's okay. If you don't, please read it. And let's maybe go next. Our Scrum team has this. Our Scrum team has this person on, which is on the photo, correct? No, we don't have him. It's his brother actually. It's Faramir, not Boromir. For those who've seen it. Why am I using him instead of the Boromir? Well, I believe that this is one of the most underrated, people in the story of Lord of the Rings in the movies, actually. So if you didn't read the books, please do. He says, and this will show you how strong of a person he was, that war must be, and while we defend our lives against a destroyer who would devour us all, but I do not love the bright sword for its sharpness, nor the arrow for its swiftness, nor the warrior for his glory. I love only what they defend, the city of men of Numenor. What it means? Well, it means that you have to stand up and you don't have to be a leader. He was actually the second son of the ruling steward in Minas Tirith, which means that he was not the first, not the second. He was maybe third in command, but he stood up. And while doing so, we can see that he used this characteristic of servant leaders. And maybe you should read more about this. This is from one of the essays in the Servant Leadership in Action book, which contains 42, I believe, essays from various leaders, military leaders, CEOs, book writers, and athletes even, who talk about this concept in practice. And for this, it's not easy maybe, but you can figure out that it leads to the last 2 points, the commitment to growth of people and building community. And being on this conference, you know how important community is and how commitment to growth of the people is important for you because you want to be better, I don't know, programmer, person. Maybe you hear something you want to implement, and maybe you will be just, a little bit better in one particular feature. But still, I mentioned on the slide with the Scrum team that these hobbits are interns, and I mean it. I mean this, because why I'm really comparing this? In the end, when you look at each of these hobbits in the movies and the books, that's even a comment from Saruman himself that they grew up, which means that after they were sort of overlooked by Gandalf, Aragorn, and others, they became a better person. They created a team, and they meant it to the end. They finished up until the end. And there is this nice book, Tribe of Mentors, I'm currently reading. If you want to just listen to this book and share some experiences, by experiences I mean another set of people who are talking about how are they dealing with ambiguity, with saying no, or just day-to-day things like how they motivate themselves. And this is what we are doing basically in our teams, in our even families. We are trying to, going back to the slide about servant leaders, to grow up. And last but not least, there is also, I mentioned Legolas, Gimli, senior leaders. The keynote from the first day actually answers this very good, in a very good way. If you are a senior developer, then your main goal is basically to build a culture, because you are mature enough to do so, to make the difference. And the ethos, as it was called in the keynote yesterday. Because, the culture is actually we, and this is like our company, my organization. It's not they. It's not like you have to let somebody do what your company does. I believe in what my company does, and you should too. If you don't, then you may go back to the first question on why. Why are you here? What is your purpose? Do you want to maybe, I don't know, create a beauty in life? Or maybe you want to help others? Or maybe you want to, I don't know, make order and be powerful? And the Scrum Master is our Sam, who was really, if you again read the books, or maybe just see the movie, he was commented by Faramir in this, and Faramir says about Samwise, "The Shire must truly be a great realm, Master Gamgee, where gardeners are held in high honor. And we should also honor our gardeners, people who are doing this dirty job maybe in your eyes. Because from Tolkien's perspective, the story of Sam was a reflection of an English soldier, a bateman, which is the sort of servant for the officer during the First World War. And Tolkien said that he recognized these soldiers as superior to himself. Very interesting. And what's about our Boromir? So BJ, again on another presentation, or no, it was a keynote again, there was this brilliant jerk concept. I would say that Boromir failed in the fellowship because he wasn't a cultural fit. He was a misfit, actually. And culture, again, it supersedes people and it celebrates value. If you are not a good match, if you didn't figure out your purpose, or your purpose is just different than your company's, then maybe you can figure this out in a different way. And just looking at this, this is actually a screenshot from this website called 16personalities.com. It's about the Myers-Briggs personality test. It sort of does this sort of segmentation on 16 personality types. You can look at this. I did this exercise in my team, and the interesting result was that, like, anybody is different. And I don't want to label somebody or just let some test in the internet to define you. But it's a good starting point to figure out what's your purpose and how can you approach life in a way that it's sort of right sorry for you. Because in the end, I believe that any of you knows that diversity isn't about ethnicity or gender or skin color or whatever, but it's a degree of differences between team members, between the people who are here, and inclusion on the other hand is the recognition and appreciation of these differences and applying it in the day-to-day world, day-to-day life. And in the end, what's eucatastrophe? It's the terminology from this on story tales, fairy stories book from Tolkien from the beginning. Eucatastrophe is this term figured out by him to define the joy at the end of the something with some poignant grief with it. So some bittersweet ending. What can it be? For us, it can be an end of the sprint, or maybe some summary of your quarterly goals. Maybe your teammate is leaving and something is finishing and you have to do some new work. Maybe a new manager, or requirement changes. Maybe somebody in your team has personal problems. And I'm going deeper in this because maybe there is the big fight in your team. Or even worse, maybe some member of your family is sick. All of this is a part of life. For us, it's like cycle of day-to-day job, every sprint, every quarter. And you can see from the top to the bottom that it's all on top of the human emotion. It's not that we can stop on the goals and just do the big cut from everything else. We are still human. And humans have emotions. And that's why I mentioned that empathy is a very important feature of the servant leader. And because of this, at the end, there is no courage without vulnerability. This was another talk from yesterday, which mentioned this concept. Because, without vulnerability, you cannot be brave, actually. Because now, if it wouldn't be brave, it just would be a thing. Our poor Frodo was doing this task of delivering the ring to the Mount Doom, as you can see. In the end, he succeeded. But he was weak, and with help of many others, the whole team, our Scrum team, our example Scrum team, he was able to succeed. And I believe that, we, every one of us, even though we have some crumbling, very hard task on us, maybe some personal problems, we can still succeed if we go together as a team or as a family even, anywhere. What's important is that in Tolkien's work, I see the reverence, and I can admire his work, and I can think about this recovery from what I'm doing right now. And I hope that you, for this talk, can also feel this recovery and escape from your day-to-day job to figure out about some universal truths which may be forgotten. Because, not on every day, as I said, good and evil are fighting. Maybe there is a fight, maybe a literal fight outside your borders you are worried about, but you want to think about it and you want to stop. Maybe this is the good time. Because being vulnerable, saying that I'm afraid, it's not a bad thing. It's a human thing to do. And in the end, this is the leader's job to appreciate that and, maybe not handle it, but help the others to serve others, actually, as I mentioned, so that we can be encouraged to do better things. Maybe even sometimes things which we thought were impossible, like Frodo did, delivering the ring to the end. So, in the end, I just wanted to finish with some summary. And again, this was the pleasure to be here on this conference and face-to-face talking to you. This is the blessing which Elrond gave to the fellowship when they were leaving. And now I will try to say it in Elvish. So, Alatira akahaya malsi avanya asmare oleriar. Namarie. Thank you.